The neighborhood was idyllic, the kind of place where lawns were manicured to perfection and neighbors exchanged smiles that hinted at nothing but cordiality. Maria and Thomas lived in a modern, glass-fronted home at the end of the cul-de-sac, a house that seemed to symbolize their seemingly flawless life. To outsiders, they were the ideal couple, successful, attractive, and deeply in love. Maria, a renowned interior designer, had her name etched on the most luxurious homes in the city. Thomas, a tech entrepreneur, had a calm demeanor that balanced her fiery personality. Their mornings were choreographed routines. Maria brewed coffee while Thomas skimmed the news on his tablet. They shared playful banter, exchanged kisses that seemed genuine, and often spoke of their dreams as if they were still newlyweds. On weekends, they hosted lively dinner parties that brought together their elite circle of friends. Accomplished professionals, artists, and entrepreneurs, all bound by a shared love of excess and ambition. But beneath the polished surface, there were cracks. Maria, though always smiling, often felt a quiet emptiness gnawing at her. The years had dulled the spark between her and Thomas. Their conversations, once rich and endless, had become transactional. The love remained, but passion was a stranger. Thomas, on the other hand, was too preoccupied to notice. His startup was on the brink of landing a major deal, and his days were consumed by meetings, strategy sessions, and late nights in front of his laptop. He adored Maria but had grown blind to her subtle cries for attention. Their world appeared invincible, but the truth lingered just out of sight. Maria had begun to seek distractions, small indulgences that could fill the void she couldn't name. It started with harmless flirtations at dinner parties, an extended laugh at a friend's joke, a lingering touch on someone's arm. It was nothing serious, she told herself, nothing that would hurt anyone. Yet, deep down, she knew her perfect life was a delicate facade, and one wrong move could shatter it all. This was the calm before the storm, the moment when everything seemed stable, right before the ground beneath them would begin to crumble. Maria sat in her tastefully decorated office, the sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting warm patterns on the designer rug. From the outside, everything appeared pristine. Her life, her career, even her meticulously arranged desk. Yet, within her, there was an ache she couldn't ignore, a restlessness that no amount of success or luxury could quell. It had started subtly, an internal whisper that grew louder with each passing day. She couldn't pinpoint when the longing began, but she could no longer deny its presence. The passion in her marriage had dulled, replaced by a comfortable monotony. Thomas was a good man, a devoted husband, but his constant focus on work left Maria feeling invisible. The attention she once craved now came from others, strangers, acquaintances, and even close friends. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. A message from Eliza, her closest friend and confidant, lit up the screen. "Eliza, dinner tonight? Just us girls." Maria smiled, feeling a pang of guilt. She loved Eliza, but recently their conversations had veered into dangerous territory. Eliza had a boldness Maria admired and envied, a willingness to indulge in forbidden thrills without apology. The last time they'd had dinner, Eliza had casually mentioned her secret arrangement with a mutual friend from their social circle. "It's just fun," Eliza had said, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Nothing serious. It's not like I'm leaving my husband." Maria had laughed it off then, dismissing the idea as something outrageous and far removed from her own life. But the seed had been planted. The idea lingered, tantalizing her in quiet moments. Could she step outside the boundaries of her marriage? Would it really be as harmless as Eliza claimed? By the time Maria arrived at the restaurant that evening, her mind was buzzing with conflicting emotions. Eliza greeted her with a knowing smile, as if she could see the turmoil behind Maria's composed exterior. Over wine, their conversation meandered, eventually landing on the topic that Maria had been both dreading and anticipating. "You're bored, aren't you?" Eliza asked bluntly, swirling her glass of red wine. Maria hesitated, the words caught in her throat. She wanted to deny it, to insist her life was perfect. But instead, she found herself nodding. Eliza leaned in, her voice low and conspiratorial. "There's nothing wrong with wanting more, Maria. Life is too short to settle for anything less than excitement. You don't have to do anything crazy. Just explore. See what's out there." Maria felt her heart race at Eliza's words, a mixture of fear and exhilaration coursing through her. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen. That night, as she lay in bed beside Thomas, his soft snores filling the room, Maria stared at the ceiling, her mind spinning with possibilities. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, but she knew one thing. Something had to change, and it would, sooner than she ever expected. A week after the dinner with Eliza, Maria found herself back at the same restaurant, seated at a secluded table in a private room. She wasn't alone this time. Alongside her were Eliza, Victoria, a glamorous yet mysterious woman from their social circle, and Daniel, a mutual friend known for his charisma and charm. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that made Maria's pulse quicken. Eliza was the first to speak. "We all know why we're here. Let's skip the formalities." Maria shifted uncomfortably in her seat, unsure of what she had agreed to. It had started with a casual conversation, but now it felt like she had been swept into something much larger, something dangerous. "Look," Eliza continued, her tone playful but firm, "we're adults. We love our lives, our partners, but let's be honest. Sometimes we need more. This doesn't have to be messy. No one gets hurt if we're careful." Daniel leaned back, a confident smirk on his face. "So, what are the rules?" Victoria chimed in, her voice cool and detached. "Discretion is key. No one can know. We keep it within this circle, safe, contained. And no emotional attachments." Maria's heart raced as the conversation unfolded. It was surreal, like she was watching a scene from a movie rather than participating in it. She glanced at Eliza, who gave her an encouraging nod. "This is crazy," Maria finally said, her voice trembling. Eliza laughed. "Crazy is what makes life worth living, darling. You don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with. But if you decide to join us, know that it's about fun, freedom, and trust. Nothing more, nothing less." Maria hesitated, her mind a whirlwind of doubt and temptation. She thought of Thomas, of their life together, and the vows they had exchanged. But then she thought of the emptiness she had been feeling, the longing for something, anything, that would make her feel alive again. Before she could stop herself, the words slipped out. "Okay, I'm in." Eliza grinned triumphantly, raising her glass. "To freedom," she said, clinking glasses with the others. "To freedom," Maria echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. As the group dissolved into laughter and chatter, Maria felt a mixture of exhilaration and dread. She had crossed a line, one she could never uncross. She told herself it was harmless, just a game. But deep down, she knew she had set something in motion, something that would change everything. For better or worse, Maria had made her choice, and there was no turning back. The pact had been made, and Maria convinced herself it was harmless. A daring secret that would inject excitement into her otherwise predictable life. First, it was thrilling. She felt alive in a way she hadn't in years, her senses heightened with every stolen glance, every subtle touch exchanged during gatherings with the group. It was a game, one she thought she could control. Her first rendezvous was with Daniel. It happened at a boutique hotel on the other side of town, where the anonymity of the setting felt both nerve-wracking and exhilarating. Maria had been nervous, her heart pounding as she entered the dimly lit room. But Daniel's easy charm quickly put her at ease, and for the first time in a long while, she felt desired in a way that was intoxicating. Afterward, she told herself it was just a one-time thing. But the exhilaration lingered, and soon, she found herself drawn back into the circle's forbidden web. Victoria invited her to a lavish dinner, and the two women shared knowing glances across the table. That night, the boundaries blurred even further. Maria's actions began to bleed into her everyday life. She became more confident, more radiant, and even Thomas noticed the change. "You seem different lately," he said one evening as they prepared dinner together. Happier, maybe? Maria smiled, deflecting with a kiss on his cheek. Just work going well, she replied, masking her guilt with ease. But the excitement came with a cost. Maria started to lose control of the carefully crafted facade of her life. She became distracted, her attention slipping at work. She missed deadlines, forgot appointments, and her assistant began noticing her unusual behavior. At home, Thomas's suspicions began to grow. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but something about Maria felt off. She was more secretive, always guarding her phone, and her once clear schedule was now peppered with mysterious work meetings. One night, Thomas caught a glimpse of her phone as she typed a message. The name on the screen wasn't familiar, but the content of the chat was enough to make his stomach churn. Maria, tonight was perfect. Can't wait for next time. He didn't confront her then, choosing instead to observe. He started piecing together the subtle clues, her late nights, the changes in her demeanor, and the occasional slip of the tongue. Maria, too consumed by the thrill of her secret life, was oblivious to Thomas's growing unease. She believed she had everything under control, that her actions were unnoticed. But the cracks were already forming, and it was only a matter of time before everything she had built would come crashing down. Thomas sat alone in his home office, staring at the soft glow of his laptop. The house was quiet, save for the distant sound of Maria showering upstairs. He had always trusted her. Why wouldn't he? Their life together was perfect, or so he thought. But lately, the unease in his chest refused to go away. It started with small things. Her sudden change in wardrobe, the way she seemed more attached to her phone than ever before, and her growing habit of slipping away for hours at a time under the guise of work. Then there was that message. Tonight was perfect. Can't wait for next time. He replayed the moment in his head, wishing he hadn't seen it but unable to forget. It had been weeks since that night, and since then, Thomas had quietly observed Maria's behavior, looking for answers to questions he didn't want to ask. Tonight, he decided to act. He opened Maria's laptop, which she often left in the kitchen, and tried to log in. The password had changed, something she'd never done before. Interesting, he muttered under his breath. Instead, he turned his attention to her phone, left charging on the counter. His hands trembled as he picked it up. He wasn't proud of what he was doing, but he felt desperate. Maria had always been private, but now her secrecy felt calculated, deliberate. The phone was locked. Thomas sighed in frustration, placing it back where he'd found it. He decided to approach the situation differently. Over the next week, Thomas installed software on their home devices that synced with Maria's accounts. An unethical move, but one he felt justified in making. Slowly, pieces of a disturbing puzzle began to emerge. He found fragments of messages, barely coherent from the encryption, but enough to confirm his fears. Names of mutual friends appeared in the chats: Eliza, Daniel, Victoria. At first, Thomas couldn't believe it. How could the people they trusted most be involved? He began documenting everything. Screenshots of messages, timestamps of her late-night outings, even receipts from hotels and restaurants. Maria, blissfully unaware, continued her double life, growing more reckless as the thrill consumed her. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Maria laughing at a TV show, Thomas studied her closely. She looked radiant, almost euphoric. But to him, the sight of her now made his stomach twist. "You seem happy," he said, his voice carefully neutral. Maria smiled, brushing his comment off with a laugh. "I guess I am. Things have been good lately." Thomas forced a smile in return, masking the storm brewing within him. He had all the confirmation he needed, and his next step was clear. He wouldn't confront her, not yet. Instead, he would let the truth unfold on his terms. And when it did, Maria wouldn't just lose him. She would lose everything. Thomas sat in the darkness of his home office, the glow of the monitor casting sharp shadows across his face. It had been 3 days since he'd discovered the extent of Maria's betrayal, and he had scarcely slept. Every detail he unearthed from her messages only deepened the ache in his chest. It wasn't just one affair. It was a twisted web involving Eliza, Victoria, and Daniel. He pored over the group chat Maria thought was safe. The messages were carefully coded with euphemisms, but the intent was clear. There were mentions of meetups at boutique hotels, shared secrets, and even mocking references to their oblivious spouses. Thomas clenched his fists as he read one particular message from Eliza. Eliza, Maria, you've really outdone yourself with Daniel. You're practically glowing these days. Maybe Thomas should thank us. Another from Victoria was even worse. Victoria, we all have needs, darling. Men like Thomas wouldn't understand. Too busy with their startups to notice what we're up to. Lucky us, right? The betrayal wasn't just about Maria. It was the sheer audacity of the people he had considered friends. They had laughed with him, dined at his table, and all the while, they were complicit in this deception. Thomas sat back, staring at the screen with a growing sense of resolve. This wasn't just about infidelity. It was about humiliation, disrespect, and betrayal on a scale he hadn't thought possible. For a moment, he considered confronting Maria outright, but the thought felt hollow. A simple confrontation wouldn't suffice. Words alone wouldn't make her or the others understand the depth of the pain they'd caused. No, he needed to go deeper. He needed a plan. Thomas spent the next few days meticulously gathering evidence. He made copies of the chats, emails, and hotel bookings, assembling a file so damning it could destroy not only Maria but everyone involved. He didn't know yet how he would use it, but he knew the time would come. As he worked, he began noticing patterns. The group had a routine, a cycle of meetups and cover stories that Maria had rehearsed so well it was almost flawless. Almost. One particular date caught his eye. An upcoming work dinner Maria had mentioned earlier that week. Thomas now knew it was a cover for one of their clandestine meetings. He smiled grimly to himself, a cold determination settling over him. "Enjoy your little dinner, Maria," he muttered under his breath. "It'll be your last one in peace." The groundwork was laid. Thomas's mind was already racing ahead to what came next. The betrayal had opened a wound, but his revenge would leave scars, ones they'd never forget. The day of the work dinner arrived, and Thomas played his part with unsettling ease. He kissed Maria goodbye at the door, even offering to iron her dress before she left. She smiled at him with practiced charm, her demeanor so convincing that, for a fleeting moment, he questioned whether she felt any guilt at all. "Don't wait up," she said as she slipped out the door. Thomas watched her drive away, his expression unreadable. Once she was out of sight, he picked up his phone and opened the tracking app he'd secretly installed on her device. Her location pinged at a hotel on the other side of town, just as he expected. He grabbed the folder of evidence he'd been compiling and headed out, his mind coldly calculating the steps he'd take next. Maria entered the lavish hotel suite to find Daniel waiting, a bottle of wine already open on the table. He greeted her with his usual confidence, pulling her into an embrace that sent a thrill down her spine. "You're glowing," he said, echoing Eliza's earlier message. Maria laughed, brushing off the comment. "Maybe it's the excitement." The evening unfolded like so many before. Wine, laughter, and the sense of freedom Maria craved. She felt alive here, away from the expectations of her perfect life. But that feeling was shattered the moment the suite door swung open. Thomas stood in the doorway, his expression calm but his eyes burning with anger. He held up his phone, the screen displaying the group chat Maria thought was secret. "Enjoying yourselves?" he asked, his voice low and steady. Maria froze, the blood draining from her face. Daniel stepped forward, attempting to play it off. "Thomas, this isn't what it looks like." "Don't insult me," Thomas interrupted, his tone sharp. He dropped a stack of printed messages onto the table, the evidence scattering across the surface like shards of glass. Maria's mouth opened, but no words came out. The room was thick with tension, the silence broken only by Thomas's next words. "I know everything. The lies, the meetings, the group chat. All of it." He turned to Maria, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. "How long, Maria? How long have you been laughing at me behind my back?" Tears welled in her eyes, but he didn't let her speak. "I trusted you," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I trusted all of you." His gaze shifted to Daniel, who stood frozen, caught in a moment he couldn't escape. Thomas's calm exterior cracked as he stepped closer. "You thought I wouldn't find out? That I wouldn't notice? You think I'm blind? Or just stupid?" Maria finally found her voice, though it was weak and trembling. "Thomas, I can explain." "No." He cut her off, his tone final. "You've said enough without saying anything at all." He turned to leave, but paused at the door. "This isn't over. Not for you, not for any of you." The door slammed behind him, leaving Maria and Daniel in stunned silence. For the first time, the thrill she had sought so desperately felt hollow, replaced by a chilling dread. Thomas wasn't done, and they all knew it. Thomas drove home in silence, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. The confrontation had been just the beginning, a preview of what was to come. The humiliation and betrayal Maria and her so-called friends had inflicted deserved more than a moment of anger. They needed to feel the weight of their actions, just as he had. That night, Thomas sat at his desk and finalized his plan. It was a masterpiece of calculated revenge, designed not only to expose their deceit but to destroy the carefully curated lives they all valued so much. Each step was meticulously crafted to hit them where it hurt the most. Thomas drafted a series of anonymous emails, each one tailored to the recipients. Spouses, family members, and key figures in the professional lives of Maria, Eliza, Daniel, and Victoria. He attached select screenshots from the group chat, making sure to include just enough detail to confirm the betrayal without revealing his identity. The emails would be sent on a staggered schedule to ensure maximum impact. First, Maria's parents and Eliza's husband would receive theirs. Then, Daniel's business partners and Victoria's charity board members would learn of their indiscretions. Thomas knew their social circle well, and with his tech expertise, it wasn't difficult to uncover vulnerabilities. He had access to their shared investment portfolios, business ventures, and even minor financial secrets they had trusted him with over the years. He began leaking just enough information to disrupt their finances. A false tip to an investor here, a flagged account there. The goal wasn't to ruin them outright, but to destabilize their foundations. The final piece of the puzzle was a carefully edited video. Using the security footage from the hotel lobby, coupled with snippets from the group chat, Thomas created a montage that painted a damning picture of the affair. The video was scheduled to be anonymously leaked during a charity gala the group had planned to attend, a public forum where they wouldn't be able to hide. Thomas wasn't content with simply exposing them. He wanted them to unravel emotionally. Using burner accounts, he began sending cryptic messages to Maria and her friends. Simple things at first. "I know what you did. It's only a matter of time." But soon, the messages became more targeted, referencing specific events only they would understand. As Thomas finalized the plan, he felt a strange sense of calm. He didn't enjoy what he was doing, but he believed it was necessary. This wasn't just revenge, it was justice. The first email went out the next morning. Maria's father called her in a panic before she'd even had her first coffee. "Maria, what is this?" he demanded, his voice shaking. "I just received an email about you. About Thomas, about others." Maria's blood ran cold as she checked her inbox, finding a copy of the email for herself. Attached were screenshots of her conversations, the messages damning and undeniable. Her phone buzzed with a message from Eliza. "Eliza, did you get it? Someone knows." Maria's hands trembled as she stared at the screen. The life she had worked so hard to build was beginning to crumble, and deep down, she knew exactly who was behind it. Thomas's revenge was underway, and it was only just beginning. Maria sat at the kitchen table, her hands shaking as she stared at her phone. The email had been devastating, not only because of the content but because of what it meant. Her secret was no longer safe. Her father's voice still echoed in her mind, his disappointment slicing through her like a knife. Meanwhile, Thomas, calm and composed, went about his morning routine as if nothing had happened. He sipped his coffee, skimmed the headlines, and even kissed Maria on the cheek before leaving for work. She watched him go, her heart pounding. Did he know? Was he behind this? The uncertainty gnawed at her, and by mid-morning, she couldn't take it anymore. She called Eliza. "Someone sent my father the chats," Maria whispered, pacing her office. "And I think Thomas knows." Eliza's voice was frantic. "It's not just you. My husband got the same email. He's furious, Maria. He's threatening to leave." Maria felt a chill run down her spine. "What do we do?" "I don't know," Eliza snapped. "We need to figure out who's doing this before it gets worse." But it was already worse. By the end of the day, the emails had reached Victoria's charity board and Daniel's business partners. The fallout was immediate. Victoria called Maria in tears, barely able to speak through her sobs. "They pulled my funding," she cried. "The board thinks I'm a liability now." "Maria, this is a disaster." Daniel's situation wasn't any better. His partners demanded an explanation, and his wife had locked him out of their house. Maria spent the night in a state of panic, her mind racing as she tried to think of a way to contain the damage. She considered confessing to Thomas, begging for forgiveness, but the thought terrified her. If he wasn't behind this, confessing would destroy any chance of salvaging their marriage. But her paranoia grew. Every time she looked at Thomas, she felt as if he knew. His calm demeanor seemed deliberate, calculated, as though he was waiting for her to crack. Meanwhile, Thomas watched the chaos unfold from a distance, his satisfaction tempered by a cold detachment. The first strike had landed, but it was only the beginning. He had spent the evening reviewing the responses to his emails, each one confirming the fractures he'd created in their lives. The group's carefully constructed facade was crumbling, and with it, their sense of control. Thomas wasn't done. The next phase of his plan was already in motion, and this time it would hit even closer to home. As Maria lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, she had no idea that her worst fears were about to come true. The next morning, Maria woke to a storm of messages flooding her phone. Her stomach sank as she opened the first one. A furious voice note from Daniel. "Did you see the video? Who the hell sent this? My wife just forwarded it to me, and she's threatening divorce. This wasn't supposed to go public, Maria." Maria's blood ran cold. A video? She quickly opened her email and found the link Daniel had mentioned. Trembling, she clicked on it. The video started with innocuous footage. Security camera clips of the group entering and leaving hotels, smiling, laughing, oblivious to the recording devices around them. But as it continued, the visuals transitioned to screenshots of their explicit group chat, complete with timestamps and context. The final shot was a damning sequence. Maria and Daniel in a hotel lobby, exchanging a kiss before heading upstairs. It was a perfect storm of evidence, edited together to leave no room for doubt. The video had been sent to all their mutual contacts, and the damage was instant. Maria's phone rang. It was Eliza, her voice a mixture of fury and desperation. "Maria, my husband saw the video. He's packed his bags. Who's doing this to us?" "I don't know," Maria stammered, though deep down, the suspicion she'd been trying to suppress grew stronger. Thomas. It had to be him. But how had he done this? At home, Thomas watched Maria unravel from afar. He had timed the video release perfectly, ensuring that it reached not only their immediate social circle but also their extended network. Friends, family, and even professional contacts were now privy to the scandal. Maria wasn't the only one suffering. Eliza's husband had left her. Victoria's reputation in the charity world was in shambles. Daniel, once the confident charmer, was now battling rumors within his professional circle, his colleagues treating him like a pariah. Thomas remained cool and composed, his mask of normalcy firmly in place. That evening, he made a deliberate show of concern when he found Maria sitting on the couch, her face pale and tear-streaked. "Are you okay?" he asked, his tone soft. Maria looked at him, her lips trembling as she tried to speak. "There's something happening. I don't know who's doing it, but Someone's trying to ruin me. Thomas tilted his head, feigning confusion. Ruin you? What do you mean? Her eyes darted away, unable to meet his gaze. It's complicated. Just trust me, Thomas. I'll fix it. He leaned forward, his voice laced with subtle menace. I hope you do, Maria. Secrets have a way of catching up to people. Don't they? Maria froze, her heart pounding as his words sank in. Did he know? Was this his way of telling her? Thomas stood and kissed her forehead, a gesture that now felt cold and deliberate. Let me know if you need anything, he said, walking away as if nothing had happened. Maria sat in silence, the weight of her guilt and fear crushing her. The web of lies she'd woven was unraveling, and with each passing day, it became clearer. She was no longer in control. Thomas, however, was just getting started. The second strike had landed, and the final act of his revenge was already in motion. Maria's phone buzzed relentlessly. She sat frozen as messages from friends and family poured in, each one dripping with shock and condemnation. Her father disowned her. Her mother refused to answer her calls, and whispers of the scandal spread like wildfire. Maria's once perfect social standing was in ruins. At work, her boss called her into the office. We can't afford this kind of attention, he said coldly, handing her a termination letter. Maria staggered out, her world crashing around her. Everywhere she turned, there was only judgment, isolation, and the echoes of her mistakes. Thomas watched her spiraling in silence, his calm exterior hiding the satisfaction he felt. This was the justice she deserved. The charity gala arrived, a grand event Maria and her friends had planned to attend. Despite the chaos, they decided to show up, hoping to salvage their reputations. As they mingled nervously, the lights dimmed for a presentation. Suddenly, the projector displayed the damning video, every message, every rendezvous, every betrayal, played for the entire room to see. Gasps and whispers filled the air as Maria, Eliza, Victoria, and Daniel stood paralyzed, unable to move or speak. Their humiliation was complete, their social lives obliterated in front of the very people they had once sought approval from. Thomas, standing in the shadows, watched their downfall with cold satisfaction. This was his ultimate revenge. The fallout was swift and brutal. Maria became a pariah, her phone silent except for angry messages from former friends and family. Eliza's husband filed for divorce, Victoria withdrew from public life, and Daniel's business collapsed as investors pulled out. Maria tried to apologize to Thomas, begging for forgiveness, but he refused to engage. You made your choices, Maria, he said coldly. Now live with them. She was left alone, her perfect life shattered beyond repair. The others faced similar fates, their once glamorous worlds reduced to ruins. Thomas had won, but the cost of his revenge was yet to reveal itself. With the storm behind him, Thomas sat alone in their now quiet home. The satisfaction he'd felt from exacting revenge began to fade, replaced by a hollow emptiness. The house felt colder, quieter, a stark reminder of the life he had dismantled, not just Maria's but his own as well. He looked at a photo of their happier days, wondering if there had been another path. Could he have salvaged their marriage instead of destroying it? Could he have healed without vengeance? Though he had exposed the truth and claimed justice, he couldn't ignore the lingering emptiness. Revenge, he realized, didn't bring peace. It only deepened the wounds. Thomas sold the house a month later, leaving behind the remnants of a life he no longer recognized. He moved to a smaller apartment in the city, focusing on rebuilding himself rather than the ruins of his past. Maria, now estranged from everyone she once knew, moved out as well, taking a job far below her former stature. She lived quietly, haunted by her choices and the scars they left behind. In time, Thomas found solace in simplicity. He joined a running club, made new friends, and started a small consulting firm. While the pain of Maria's betrayal never fully disappeared, it became a distant ache rather than a consuming fire. For both of them, life moved on, but it was forever shaped by the choices that had shattered their facades. Some wounds heal, others don't. All they could do was live with the lessons their mistakes had taught them.